Hey guys, Tepcocyclerepair. So I had back surgery last week on Thursday. So I didn't upload a video for Monday, but I am working on it. I can't bend over, can't sit for more than 15 minutes. They want me to walk around, stay on my feet, or lay down on my side, and I only lay down when I'm sleeping. So if I can stand, I can work on bikes. Trying not to hurt myself out here, but we're going to be checking the valves on this 2011 YZ450F. Just make sure everything's squared away on that thing before we try to start it. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so I already got the seat off. I'm just going to go ahead and pull the tank off. I got the shrouds off the front here. That's all done. This bike's been sitting for an unknown amount of time. I don't know what its background is or condition. This is a rescue bike. I'm going to be saving and redoing. So, but I like to go through the engine, make sure everything's good. I did a leak down test on it already, and the leak down test was good. So I think it was 11%. So that's not too bad. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the valve cover, check the valves, make sure they're in spec, and we should be good to go. So pulling the tank off, it had two 8mm right here. I got two more right here. Then we have the plug underneath and the fuel line we're going to pull off, which is right under there. This also has a braiding fuel pump, Yamaha fuel pump and everything on there as well. So, but you can see some gnawing right there on that fuel line. I've already replaced the whole wiring harness and the ECU on this bike because it was damaged from a crash, not from rodents, but I wouldn't be surprised if the whole wiring harness was, so I just replaced it. So let me pull this tank off and get to the valve cover. All right, so we got to get the timing right. So I've taken off the inspection cap and also the cap here for the crank so I can rotate it and get it to top dead center of the compression stroke. So let's go over that just a minute. So if you guys are on forums and you're reading messages about people having trouble with their bike running, some people suggest the bike's 180 degrees out. So let me touch base on that a little bit. When you have the cams out of the bike and you rotate the engine, the connecting rod and the piston and the crankshaft, they don't know if they're at top dead center of the compression stroke or top dead crossover where they're going from the opening one valve to the other. It doesn't know that. It only knows that when you put the cams in. So when you're first setting up the bike, it's important that you set it up with the cam lobes in the right direction with the lobes facing the right way, and you set your time up. That's correct. When you're doing, but it doesn't matter where the piston is when you start with that. That's what I'm trying to say. So when you get the bike set up, you put your crank in, piston, put your cylinder on, put the piston at top dead center, put it on the timing mark for top dead center, and that's it. It doesn't matter if it's on a crossover or compression stroke until you put the cams in. When you put the cams in, that's what determines if it's on the crossover or the compression stroke. So as soon as you get your piston at top dead center and you have no cams in, it doesn't matter. The bike doesn't know where it's at until you tell it where it's at. But when you're doing valve checks, it needs to be at the top dead center of the compression stroke because you need to make sure that the lobes in the cam are not putting any pressure on the valves, because that'll throw off your measurements. So basically, that's what we're talking about. All right, so let me help you out with some sizes here. This is a 6mm Allen. This lower one here, the big cap, that is a 14. And then the valve cover caps up top, all right, those are a 5mm Allen. Take the vent hose off right here, just clip, slide it off. All right, so with those top three loosened and the hose out, we're just going to grab it, wiggle, and pull it off. There's the rubber gasket that goes around it, so make sure you don't tear that. It's reusable. I already pushed these in right here just to kind of break tension because you put a little bit of sealer on each one of these corners, as you can see when you put it back on. So I just made sure that it was broken free, so now when I pick it up, everything will come up together. And there we go. Now let's get it turned to top dead center. All right, so we're going to rotate it till our timing mark is lined up here with that notch. And then we're looking for these dots here. There's a one right there. That should be lined up with the valve cover gasket right here surface. One there. You'll see that dot will be there. And there'll be another one here. All right, so we got to rotate it, and I will show you what that looks like. So now when you're rotating it, cam chain tensioner is here. The cam chain comes up, goes around this way. You want to rotate the engine counterclockwise. So I'm going to be going down, all right, rotating it this way. So you're always pulling the chain straight down and you're not pulling it against the tensioner. That's how you want to do that. And also have the spark plug out so it makes it easier to turn. All right, so if you look inside there, we have our timing mark lined up All right, and then up here we have our dot right there, and then the other one right there. And if you look at the lobes, we know we're at top dead center of the compression stroke because both of our lobes on this reverse cylinder YZF are up and inward, where if it was a regular YZ non-reverse cylinder, they would be up and out. So that's where we're at here. All right, so looking at our intake side, we're supposed to be within 0.10 millimeter to 0.15 millimeter. So these two right here, this left one is just over at a 0.006 or a 0.152 millimeter right there. I can't get the next size in. But this one over here, this intake is at a 0.009, right? Or you can see that. Or 0.229. So we're at almost over 0.20 millimeters on that intake side over there, and we're just over 0.15. So our left intake, if I was just measuring this and I wasn't taking it off, that's fine. It's just a hair over. But the right one we got to fix. So and this, you know, why this happens, I don't know the history of this bike. Usually what happens is when people are setting these up, they don't have the right size shim, so they go a little bit looser because they know the valve's going to sink some eventually. But we're going to put it within spec because you don't want to have a problem with the bike running and think back, say, well, should I have made it right or not? So let's do that. Let's check the exhaust side. All right, for the exhaust side, our spec should be 0.20 to 0.25 millimeters, and we're looking at a 22 on the left one and 30 on the right one, or in inches is 0.0079 to 0.0098, and we have 0.009 or 0.012. So we're a little big on this one too. Now this left intake here at 0.009, or it's 0.229. That one is within spec right there, so we're going to leave that left one. That's okay. The right one though, it's at a 0.12 or a 0.30. That one's too big, so so both of these on this side we got to take care of. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. So let's get this prepped up for that. All right, so start off with making sure you're keeping track of everything. So write down what your measurements are, because the next thing we got to do is pull the buckets and measure the shims and see what size shims are in there, so we can use our shim calculator to get the right size shim. All right, so clear out a spot so you can put your cams. Make sure it's clean, there's no dirt or debris on it. And then the first thing we're going to do is going to release tension on the cam chain. So we're going to take this 10 millimeter out of here, and we're going to take these 2/8, and that's going to release tension. I also stuck some paper towels down in here so that when you start taking things off, nothing falls down into the stator side. If it does, don't panic. Just pull your stator side off here and try to get whatever you dropped out. You can get it through here. So, but you know, the object is to not drop anything down there in the first place. So let's go ahead and pull this off. All right, so I already cracked these loose. Just be mindful there's spring tension on this. You can see it kind of pushing against these bolts. So just loosen it back and forth. It'll get to a point where it's loose. There is a gasket underneath there, so just be gentle with it if you want to try to save it. That's just some sealant on there, but there's our cam chain tensioner. All right, so now up top we have playing our cam chain. All right, so I'm going to take these caps off. So these are all numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to back them out slowly. Just do 4, 3, 2, just a little bit at a time until they come all the way loose, and then we're going to pull the cap off. All right, so now with all these loose right here, we're going to grab the cam cap and wiggle it to get it off. There's some guide pins in there, so all right, now see that clip right there? It's about to jump on me. That clip is what would fall down into the lower case right there. This one right here. That's what you got to watch out for, okay? So we'll get that one out of the way. Then I'm going to move the chain off and pull this cam out. All right, with the chain off to the side right here, I just wiggled the cam a little bit to get the chain out of the way. And we're just going to pull it up out of the way. All right, so the next thing we got to do is pull the buckets off and get the shims underneath. There's shims underneath these buckets, so I'm going to use a magnet, and we're going to try to pull it up nice and easy, even. There you go. And you want the shim to come up with it. Just be mindful there's a shim underneath there. And you can see there's our shim. And that's what we need to measure. All All right, put the magnet out of the way. The shim is sitting right in there. All right, so this shim right here is too thin. We're going to have to measure this one and then use the calculator to find out where it should be. All right, so we're looking at a 1.90 millimeter or 0.07, say 0.75 inches. All right, so measuring the shim was a 190, so I'm going to need a 200 based on the chart. And the way the chart reads, I'll throw a picture of it here, is that on the left side you look for your clearance, and then on the top you look for the shim size. And then when you find the shim size on the top, you come down to the line where your measured amount is on the left, and where that intersects is what you should have. So on mine, I'm measuring a 0.30, and I got a 190 in there. So when I come down where they meet, it's a 200 what I'm looking for. So let me get a 200 for that. All right, so on the intake cam, when I pulled that, you see the shim stayed in place. So just use a magnet and get it up out of there. That's why I got to pay attention to them so you don't want them to fall anywhere. All right, and there's our shim. Let's bring it over to the table and measure it. All right, so our intake shim is going to measure a 170. All right, so I got the right shim set up now. Now always measure these like this. I need a 200 for here. This says on it it's a 210. All right, but it is actually a 198, 199, 200. That's what this one is. It's right around 200. Definitely not a 2.1. So make sure you measure those. Let's get them back in the bike. All right, so all my shims and caps are back in place. I'm going to drop the cams back in. Pay attention to your timing marks again. We have the timing mark didn't move down at the bottom, and then we have our chain just kind of pulled up out of the way with a safety wire. So I should be able to drop both the cams back in here, and then put the retaining clips on here so it stops the two clips that stop the cams from sliding back and forth, and then the caps. All right, so make sure when you put these in, you get your retaining clip right in here. Just put it in that groove. Right, pushing down in the groove right there, so that's all set, and then the cap's going to go on top. Make sure you have oil in your journals there, right in there. Make sure there's oil in there. Everything looks good. You can take the cap and kind of push it down almost all the way. Make sure it sits down evenly. If it doesn't, make sure your clip didn't come out and you don't have anything weird going on. So now we're going to tighten these down. At first by hand. All right, so when you're setting the timing on these, make sure again that your mark is still in the correct spot right there, and you can see it right on there. And then when you come up here, we're looking for, okay, so there's the dot right there on the intake, and then the exhaust, you can see it there. So let's go over to torque sequence. Now, some people will tell you to cross hatch this, and that's not how it's supposed to work. There's numbers on these caps, and that's the sequence they're supposed to go in. Let me show you how it is in the manual. It says tighten the bolts in the specified torque in 2 or 3 steps in the proper tightening sequence as shown. And you can see how they show you there. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But if you look at the caps, you see where 1, 2 is, 3, 4. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then where they have number 5 in the manual, right here, is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the tightening sequence. Otherwise, your bearings can get jammed in here and your cams won't rotate smoothly. So the torque spec is only 10 Newton meters, so be careful. It's 7.2 foot-pounds. That's really low. I'm going to use an inch-pound torque wrench to get that done. All right, so I'm going to start out by setting it to 5 Newton meters, and I'm going to do it in the order that the book says and what's on the caps. All right, now I'm going to put it up to 10. Do the same thing. Going to go back through and make sure that they're all good. And then we're going to make sure that both of our cams are spinning nice and freely. Good, good. Everything is looking just fine. All right, let's put our cam tensioner back in. All right, now our cam tensioner here has the word up on it. That's going to be the top. We're going to take a little small flathead screwdriver. There's a little flat blade in there. You can see it. We're going to screw this all the way in. Just going to retract it all the way. All right, and it's going to hold it. So we're going to put it back in here, tighten these down, and then we just put a screwdriver in here. We're going to turn it a hair, and it's going to pop it and release it. I'll show you that. All right, so here you can see we have play. Just going to go in here. And then just turn it a hair and it'll spin back. Come back here, we have tension. Now before we do anything else, we're going to rotate the engine all the way and remeasure all of our gaps. Within that release, I'm going to put the center cap on here. There's torques for these and there's torque specs in the book, but just get them tight. Don't over tighten these things. They'll strip really easy. And a lot of times the torque that's on here might have been good when it's new, but when people put it in and out, they're going to get weaker. So just don't over torque them. 17 millimeter on the bolt. Give it true full rotations. So we come through the crossover stroke and then back to top dead center on the compression stroke. Recheck our timing marks. Check our gaps. All right, so with everything rotated around, I did it twice, double checked everything. Everything is good. Time to put the cover back on. When you put the cover back on, these two sections right here, you want to clean off any old residue from gasket sealer and put a little bit of gasket maker there and there, or Yamaha Bond, Honda Bond. Put on these corners, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will seal that up right there before you put that on. So let me get that done. So with the spark plug in, the top valve cover tightened back down, the vent line back on here, the two caps down here, this bike is ready to go. Now I'm not going to start it now. I still have to pull off the throttle body and clean that out because the bike's been sitting. I'm going to give it a cleaning as well. But that's all there is to it, to a valve adjustment on it. This is a reverse cylinder YZ450F. Hopefully you guys liked this video. Please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for further notifications. Until next time, this is Tepcocyclerepair.